The hallway echoed with the slamming sound of metal. Students turned their heads, but most quickly looked away. It wasn't unusual for trouble to break out near the lockers, but this time the noise was louder, sharper. The slam hadn't just been a locker door, it had been the final push in a storm that had been brewing for weeks. Amara stumbled back from the impact, her cheek pressed against the cold steel. Her books had already fallen to the floor, scattered like her patience. She blinked once, twice, forcing herself not to cry in front of them. Crying gave them power. And the three girls standing in front of her, Shelby, Brianna, and Kate, didn't need any more power. They had been ruling the hallway like they owned it since the start of the year. Oops, Shelby smirked, twirling a strand of her perfect blonde hair. Did I hurt your little head? Amara straightened, her hands curling into fists by instinct. But she breathed in slow. She had promised herself, and her mother, she wouldn't get into fights again. Last time, it had been detention. The time before that, suspension. But right now, the sting in her jaw wasn't the worst pain. It was the laughter. The snickers from kids who didn't dare step in. The background they didn't know. Amara had transferred to Westfield High just 3 months ago. Her father was in the military, which meant she never stayed in one place for too long. New schools meant new beginnings, but they also meant new targets. She wasn't tiny, but she wasn't the biggest girl either. What most people didn't realize was that her father had trained her in boxing since she could walk. It wasn't about violence. It was about control, discipline, and knowing she could protect herself if needed. But in this school, none of that mattered. Here, people judged you by your clothes, your phone, and whether you fit into the invisible social hierarchy. Amara didn't fit anywhere. The escalation. At first, the bullying was small. A shove in the hallway. A whispered comment about her thrift store jacket. A note in her locker that said, "Go back where you came from." She ignored it. She told herself they would get bored. But Shelby wasn't the type to get bored of cruelty. Today's locker slam was different. It wasn't a joke. It was meant to hurt her. And as Shelby leaned in, her breath hot and taunting, Amara felt something deep inside her snap. The turning point. "Don't touch me again," Amara said, her voice low. Shelby laughed. "Or what? You gonna cry? Oh wait, you already look like." She didn't get to finish. Shelby's jaw met Amara's right hook with a sharp crack that made half the hallway freeze mid-step. Brianna lunged forward, but Amara's left fist was already moving, catching her under the chin. Kate tried to grab her from behind, but Amara twisted, her elbow connecting with Kate's ribs. It wasn't messy. It wasn't wild. It was controlled, precise, the way her father had taught her. By the time a teacher came rushing down the hall, all three bullies were doubled over, clutching their faces and gasping. The hallway was dead silent except for the sound of Amara picking up her books. The consequences. Amara sat in the principal's office, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She could feel the weight of what she had done pressing on her chest. Fighting wasn't supposed to be her answer. But neither was silence. The principal sighed. "Amara, I've heard both sides. You know there will be consequences for this." She nodded. "I understand. But so should they." To her surprise, 2 other students, kids she barely knew, came forward later to confirm the months of bullying. Security footage didn't catch everything, but it caught enough. Shelby and her friends got 2 weeks of suspension. Amara got 3 days. The change. When she returned, something was different. People didn't look at her with pity anymore. Some looked with respect. Some with fear. And while she didn't care about popularity, she noticed something important: the hallway felt safer. The bullies avoided her now. More importantly, they avoided everyone else too. Maybe they learned their lesson. Or maybe they just realized they couldn't hurt people without consequences anymore. The message. One afternoon, as she packed her bag, a freshman girl she didn't know walked up to her. "Hey," the girl said softly, "thanks for what you did." They used to mess with me, too. Amara smiled. Just remember, you're stronger than you think. But strength isn't just about fists. It's about knowing when to stand up and when to walk away. She meant it. Violence wasn't the answer every time. But self-respect? That was non-negotiable.